And so then you go into labour at...
No, at 21 weeks, my waters break.
Yeah.
And it's really funny because I did a shoot for Women's Weekly. They did a cookbook that they donated all the money to charity, and they asked my mother and I to be in it. And I didn't admit that I was pregnant, and I was, 20 weeks at that point. And I remember positioning, I wore something where you couldn't quite tell, and I stood behind my mother in the shot, and I didn't feel confident enough to say, yeah, this is where it's at, and to make it public, because I was still in such a concerned frame of mind. And 3 days later, my waters broke, and then, I don't know how I didn't go into labour right then and there, or within those hours, but because there's 80% chance that you do. And then I was hospitalised from that moment on, and I stayed in hospital for another 2 weeks, and then I went into labour. So that was an altered state of reality, that whole time. I mean, to be told that your baby has got less than 10% amniotic fluid, and the repercussions of that. So there was George was overseas when it happened. Luckily, my mother was with me. But to have expert after expert come in and tell you what the reality of that could be here's what happens at this week, at 22 weeks, at 23, at 25, at 28. So there I was, with most probably a very compromised child, and I was still praying not to go into labour. I was still hoping that I could drag it out till 28 weeks. And that's the survival part of your brain that just goes, please God, let's just get to 28 weeks. But what state was she going to be in at 28 weeks if I could hold off until then? So, it was really, really difficult. And there's plenty of hours in every night where there's no nurse and there's no visitors and there's no,
there's just
where
your
you're just
thoughts and
silence, and you're sitting there, and every twitch you think is something, and it was just hideous. It's just the most difficult thing ever. Well, I thought. Yeah. And then the day 1 of week 23, which is the sort of day where you've got to start making some pretty heavy decisions. By that I mean, if the baby comes out at a certain week, I can't remember now whether it's 24 or 25 weeks, you've got to make the decision as to whether you ask the doctors to revive or not. Wow. And if you do, what's the baby going to be like? Exactly. And, are you doing what's best for the baby, and what sort of quality of life is that? So we were coming up to those sorts of decisions. And then day 1 of week 23, which was, I think, 2 days after, or the day after Mother's Day, which was so difficult because I was in a maternity ward. So, and my husband brought my dog to visit me on Mother's Day, and then I had to get out of that room. It was just so difficult. And I just thought, I woke up the following day knowing that my fate would be sealed on that day. I knew. I just woke up, I thought, we're going to make history for our family today. I just knew it. I just thought, this is not like yesterday or the day before. I just knew it 100%, and there was no talking me out of it, and I was right. My doctor came that morning, and like he did every morning and every night, he would come down that corridor with the ultrasound and show me our baby. And he came in that morning and he said, "How are you, man?" I said, I can't be, there's nothing I can do to muster any positivity. I've got really big knowing feeling that today's the day. And he said, "Man, no, we've got a big ultrasound in a couple of days, it's all going to be fine." He really, really maintained a lot of positivity around. Even though he knew the odds were against me, he still believed we could get there. Because I asked him after it all happened whether he was just trying to humour me, and he said, "No, I honestly didn't want to believe it was going to come to."
He was so invested in it.
Yeah, and he was. We're incredibly close, and he was a god for me. But yeah, my besties turned up, and they all we had a picnic on my bed, and there was just no crane, no rocket could have lifted me outside of what I knew. And then that afternoon, late afternoon, I felt a clenching that I'd never felt before. It was like a real clenching down low, and I thought, oh, I've never had that feeling before. And thought, that's not a good thing. And then VJ, my doctor, came back in for the nightly ultrasound that he did. And I said, VJ, I had a feeling I've never had before. It was like this pulling feeling, this clenching feeling. And he put the ultrasound on and had a look and said, no, Mary, everything's fine. I said to him, it's the first time I don't believe you.
Wow.
And then George arrived about an hour later, and then it was obviously I was going into labour.
Yeah, right.
And then he started timing them, and then there was a regularity appearing, and then I called the midwife, and she called VJ, and you know, and we were on.
When you knew you were when you knew you were in labour and it was on and your baby's 23 weeks, did you know the reality of that, or did you?
Yeah, I mean, I imagined it. I sort of, you know, there was no level of not being informed. You know, I was. And sadly, I was, you know, part of many, many heavy conversations with, you know, people at the top of their field, and I was surrounded by the best. But to hear it is a whole other thing.
Because your doctor said to you, your baby's still alive, but it's not going to make it down the birth canal. How do you... I can't even imagine how you get through through all of that. Like, how do you say, right, I'm still going to have to birth this baby, I'm doing this?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I screamed out no. You know, it's such a haunting sound. It was just like, you know, it's just an animal sound. It was just like I'd been, you know, wounded, you know, to the point of, you know, no recovery with that news. But I had a job to do. So I thought I had to push it to the side and get on with it.
And then you give birth to just a perfect, beautiful...
gorgeous, most stunning looking baby. I was just like, I mean, I was expecting the worst. I really was. I just thought, well, at 23 weeks, you know, what's she going to look like, and, you know, what am I going to inherit? And she was the exact opposite. I didn't even contemplate thinking that she would be beautiful or anything. I just thought I'd be, you know, seeing something I would have to spend the rest of my life trying to forget I'd seen. Yeah. And it was the complete opposite. I was, you know, it was breathtaking. And I rang my mum actually when I was going into labour and said to her, you know, you need to get to the hospital, it's happening. And then VJ rang my grief counsellor, who I'd spent quite a bit of time with in the 2 weeks that I was in hospital. And she came to be there, and she took photos, and she brought me my baby, and this woman's got an Order of Australia for the work that she's done, and so she should. I mean, this is a person that could take the most devastating moment and turn it into your most treasured one, just because she, you know, she walks around those landmines so beautifully, and she guides you through something that, you know, is so horrific, and she manages to let you accumulate memories, and she brings you, you know, given the option, would I have chosen to have held my baby? I don't know, but I really feel for women that don't get a chance to do that.
And it's very different now. It was
in the old days,
would be taken away from you.
They were, and they don't recover. Women don't recover from that. It's hard to recover even when you do, you know, hold your baby. But to never see your baby, to not name it, to not know what gender it was, for it to be whisked away, and for husbands to be taken down corridors and told, oh, just take her on a holiday, or just get her pregnant as soon as possible, pretend that it didn't happen. To not have a place where you can go to remember that baby, to not be able to bury it, and it's just, you know, heartbreaking.
What was it like the moment when you were handed Stevie? What was that moment like when you looked at her?
I was so high. I was in awe. I was completely, you know, I call it the crush of a lifetime. Yeah. It was, you know, when I say crush, I mean it on 2 levels. But it was, you know, I mean, you don't know anything until you've experienced it. Really, you're just speculating up until that point about anything in life. Yeah. It's really, really hard, because we've all got to be, you know, appearing to be experts about things that we've had no experience of, or, you know, we hear something, or someone, You know, we read about something and we think suddenly we're experts. You're nothing until you're experiencing something, and you don't know who you are until those moments. You know, you like to think you're going to be like this, and you think you're going to react like that. And I would never have preempted my response, and my response was, I was very proud, and I was very, you know.
Still a baby girl.
Yeah.
Your husband in that moment felt like all of his confidence and courage was just kicked out of him.
Yeah.
He felt like he was the opposite
Yeah.
to how you were in that moment. Do you remember looking over and seeing George, and his hand was holding his head, probably in disbelief about everything that's going on?
Yeah.
What do you remember about that time, seeing your husband so vulnerable like that?
Oh, he's the most beautiful crier in the world, you know. I sort of, in the book, I think I describe him as the Julia Roberts of male criers. You know, he cries and the whole world cries with him. Yeah. Whereas I'm a really unattractive crier.
Same. Really unattractive.
You know, it's so contorted and, and ugly, and it's like a fist. George, my mother says, he cries double tears. Like two tears just come down at it. You know, he's the most heartbreaking crier. And he was silent, and just, you know, it was just all tears, and he didn't know what to do. I mean, because I suppose essentially, you know, the role of a man is to solve a problem, you know, to get it done, and, you know, that's the primary motivation. Us is to nurture. It's, you know, it's just little inclinations, and he couldn't solve that problem. Nor could he bring himself to hold her or look at her properly.
Did he at any time that you were there?